Hello, Garland Nixon here with Laith Marouf. There are, as usual, as a result of the crazy people that run the empire, there's all kinds of terrible things going on in the Middle East, and we're going to talk about it. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Laith Marouf. And before we get going, let me show something to you that's very important. I always got to make sure everybody knows before we get going. Free Palestine TV. This is Laith's very important website. And not only is it important that we support Free Palestine, it's actually freepalestine.video. That's the website. It is not only important that you go there so you can learn everything that's going on. You can see their latest episodes, field reports, military operations, and most importantly for us, as supporters of Free Palestine TV, you'll notice the box that says donate to Free Palestine TV. Yep, see that right there? That's critical. We are the ones who help keep this important operation going. And you, as you can see, I mean, look at the video. It's very, very good video of everything going on there. You're not going to get it anywhere else but at Free Palestine TV. So go to freepalestine.video today, share that on all your social media platforms, and most importantly, if you are able to donate. You can do it one time, and certainly you can become a member of the community. You can help fund them by donating monthly. Thank you very much. Even if you can't, I understand a lot of people are struggling right now, but you can share this on all your social media platforms, and of course, you can put on there with the post a recommendation for people to visit it regularly and to donate. All right, Laith, let's get going with all the things going on here. I want to start with this. Yemen. I've heard an announcement that they are back in their embargo, shall we say, on the Red Sea and the port of, I forgot what the name, I always forget the name of the port. But at any rate, what's happening with Yemen?
Yes. So 4 days ago, the Yemeni armed forces and government announced that they will commence their siege of shipping to the Zionist colony if within those 4 days the Zionists do not lift the siege that they have conducted on Gaza and the blockade of all entry of water and food and medical supplies to the besieged strip. So the Yemeni resistance and government tried to kind of persuade the Americans and the Zionists to lift the blockade on Gaza and to continue through with the stage 2 of the ceasefire negotiations, which is supposed to end with the exit of all Israeli troops and the exchange of all prisoners of war. But as we see, the Zionists and the United States have not moved into phase 2 and have not lifted this blockade now on Gaza. So the Yemenis are back just in order to provide support for the Palestinian people and for international law to be respected. Yemen is doing what it's obliged under international law when there is a genocide being commenced. That means that a state has to abide by its obligations to stop the genocide, and that's what Yemen is doing right now.
Something else I wanted to ask you that I don't know if you're talking about over there. There is an activist here who was organizing in opposition to the genocide and the overall abuse and mistreatment of the Palestinians and people in the Middle East, period. And now the Trump administration, and I brought this up when it happened. J.D. Vance went to Europe and he preached to the Europeans about censorship. And as soon as that happened, I did a video and I said, well, everything he said was true, but there's a hole in it that you could drive a tank through. And the problem is when it comes to Zionism, the Trump people do the exact same thing that the Biden team does. The Biden team just, if they go to a country, they say we're there to help the women, the LGBTQ, whatever. They just, and then they go plunder and pillage and lie and murder, right? They simply redefine what they're doing as something that sounds good, and then they do something evil. That's it. They do it. That's what they do. That's what the empire does. So what does the Biden administration do? This guy says, well, I see a genocide and the mistreatment of a people here, the theft of land as defined in international law and by the UN in resolution after resolution. He has the power of international law and of the UN behind him.
Yeah, I mean, that whole in...
I'm just going to say this. Let me finish. They redefine it. Oh, no, that's not that. That's anti-Semitism. Boom, they go after him. Exact same thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, that whole in free speech and media rights in the United States and in the West in general, you can push through it the Titanic or an aircraft carrier, not only a tank, you know. And clearly, right now, the sacred, the official religion of Western governments that fall under the imperial rule is Zionism. You can even make fun of and desecrate Prophet Moses and Judaism itself, but you cannot touch Israel or the political ideology of Zionism. This is how severe the censorship is in the West on this issue. It is whether people like it or not, that's the official religion of the United States now, Zionism. The other thing that is clear, and I've been saying this now for a year and a half, is that where we're heading right now in the West is the internment, expulsion, and maybe the killing of Arab and Muslim diaspora communities. I warned before this when Trump said that he's going to activate the 1798 Act that allows him to detain and deport citizens without charging them in court. When he claimed that he's going to use that against the farm workers and the factory workers from South America that are really keeping the economy working, I said at that time that he's not going to deport 20 million Mexicans and Salvadorians or what have you. He's going to target Arab and Muslim communities with this. And as we see, this is the beginning of that. And I want to say one thing about Mahmoud Khalil, the student from Columbia University that just got disappeared by Trump and Vance. This is a Syrian man. He actually has a green card, married to an American woman, has a 8 months pregnant wife. Their child's gonna be American. But this is a man that worked in the UK embassy in Lebanon, managing the whole file of the regime change operations in Syria. Okay. This is a man that worked in all the manufactured NGOs in the United States after the war on Syria was launched, also to confuse and redirect the Palestinian, Arab, and Syrian, specifically youth in the United States, away from radical decolonization towards the hands of the Wahhabi and Ikhwani death squads that took over Syria. Okay. And this man was not an activist at Columbia. Mahmoud Khalil was not an activist at Columbia. He was the appointed messenger that the administration of Columbia, the Zionist administration of Columbia University, accepted as a messenger to send their back and forth with the student activists on campus. And he came out publicly against the hand-hole occupation and the movement as a whole on campus. So here is a useful tool, fool, or agent, we don't know. His name is Mahmoud Khalil, Syrian that collaborated with the sellout of his own country and the destruction of his own country. one that was willing to stand as a supposed, negotiator between the university and the demonstrators at Columbia, because he was not one of them. And what did the Zionists do in the end? They lynched him in the square publicly. And I think this is number one, his case, Mahmoud Khalil. I wish him, by the way, that he's back with his family, that obviously what is being done to him is illegal, immoral. But the thing is that the Zionist master in the White House decided to lynch a kitchen slave, a house slave, in the square publicly, so they can scare the uppity field slaves. Okay? This is what the reason that he's being now treated like this. And I warn, I hope obviously that he's going to be released, and his, that the legal system and the First Amendment in the United States withstands this fascist attack by the Trump administration. But when he's going to be released, and I believe that he will be released, we should be very careful that this whole ordeal may have been orchestrated by the Zionists to fabricate a new malleable leader for the Arabic and Muslim communities in the United States, one that diverts away from radicals that could follow the path of Malcolm X and the Black Panthers, right? We know that, many of the right now, acceptable leaders of the Black community, for instance, that were jailed briefly during the civil rights movement, are really controlled opposition to divert at the time away from Malcolm X and Martin Luther and so forth, right? So this man, and I still would say to everybody that we should support his release, and we should be active on making sure that he wins in this court case, but that we should all take this with a grain of salt, because we could be all being played right now.
It makes sense too, I mean, not saying that because there's two scenarios. One scenario could be the setup. He's one of their puppets. They make a deal. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to jail our puppet. We're going to make him look all oppressed. And then when he comes out, we'll say he's the leader, as you said. And now he's just a controlled puppet who they did a nice little stage play to set him up. The other operation is just a reminder. Yeah, you may be a puppet, but if you stand up and say the wrong thing, you're still a Muslim, you're still a Middle Easterner, and we'll treat you just like any other Muslim or Middle Easterner. You know what I mean? It could be either one of those, but yes, if he suddenly becomes the great new leader of the Muslim world, according to the, USA, what's left of NED or USAID, and, the whole system rallies behind him. Be wary of that. All right. But as we said, the bottom line is, whatever happens, it should be a wake-up call to those who had some thoughts that one of these parties was against censorship. You know what I mean? Like the Trump team was coming in to bring fairness and honesty into the system. That ain't what empire does. It can't be an empire if you do that. You know what I mean? All right. I did want to ask you, since it was in Riyadh, the so-called peace talks. I think there's more to it that we don't know, but the idea that the Russians are pounding the Ukrainians in Kursk, and all of a sudden the Ukrainians say, perhaps we should take a 30-day ceasefire, as they're running for their lives, getting wiped out. Well, of course they want a 30-day ceasefire. They're being massacred right now. And all of a sudden, the whole EU that hates Russia, we hate them, we have to kill all the Russians. Yeah, we're for a ceasefire. Good idea. Now let's see if the Russians take the ceasefire. Well, let's see. The U.S. and the Ukrainians, and obviously the Europeans, put together the terms of the ceasefire. And now what we're going to hear is, and if the Russians don't take it, then they're bad guys. I don't know that they had any input here. Anyway, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look at the return of using and sharing American intelligence with the Ukraine. and the
But
continued
they stopped for a
growth.
whole week, an entire week. They
Yeah,
stopped.
they stopped for an entire week. And of course, you have all the other agencies in Europe, intelligence agencies that have access to everything in the US because of the NATO, so they were giving anyways. And plus, as the Russians and were sitting down in Riyadh, there was that huge drone wave of attacks on Moscow and all these Russian cities. So it was like, negotiating with the gun at your head for the Russians, obviously. And this is why the Russians will not accept this. And clearly, Russia is winning militarily on the ground. It doesn't need a ceasefire. It's the Ukrainians that need a ceasefire. And, I think while it was very entertaining to watch the Ukrainian president and the prime minister of the UK and the president of France all getting humiliated in the White House around this file, and while it was entertaining to see how the European leaders have been, acting since those humiliations in the White House, I still feel that this is all entertainment. You know, Trump needed to, or the establishment that puppets Trump, needed to create a bad cop, good cop situation, because all of the Western, vassals and mouthpieces have been playing the bad cop for 15 years straight up, and there was no good cop. How is Trump and the empire going to negotiate with Russia, or Russia even accepting it, if there's not at least one that is playing a good cop? Okay, and so I think we have seen that now played out, and obviously it seems like the establishment in the United States couldn't even hold the act for too long. They haven't memorized their lines, or they were too used to the old lines that they had to immediately fall back into their original role as a bad guy. It's hard after you play 20 different movies being the bad guy to be casted as a good guy, right? Like even any actors usually have a problem with that. So imagine like political actors that are just sock puppets and don't have any mental capabilities to create their own policies. So, I hope the best for Russia, our brothers and sisters in Russia, but I don't see how this war in Ukraine is going to end without a full defeat of the Ukrainians. And if at some point the United States decides that it wants to end this war for real, it can end it in one day. There's no. We saw the clobbering that even though it was an act, all those humiliations in the White House. Can you imagine what could happen behind closed doors if there's an emperor that wants the war to be ended?
We've seen history. If they wanted India ended, the truth is, historically, they'll shoot the proxy if they want. You know what I mean? If they really wanted it, historically, when they wanted a proxy or a puppet out of the way, we know what the empire does to get a puppet out of the way. So the idea that they're fumbling around and they're soft handing this doesn't make sense. All right, let's get to the big story. One of the things I find interesting, I'll make this quick and throw it to you. US, this is a Christian country, right? Christian country, really. So on behalf of Zionism, your proxies are slaughtering, murdering, shooting Christians, mowing them down, beating them on camera, beating them to death, men, women, and children, everything. And the US is still supporting the Zionists and their terrorist proxies no matter what. Talk about Syria. Your thought. I mean, so-called Christian country, but as Zionism always is the only religion that matters, because of course it is now officially the religion of the empire. Zionism is officially the imperial religion. Syria, what's going on? What do we need to know?
Yeah, look, as a Syrian, I watched this last week, and my heart was broken. I couldn't get myself to watch all these
No.
videos, but I did follow. I would read what the description is, and I would not watch the videos. But Syria has been under this conspiracy to cut it up and ethnically cleanse it and make it into something that it isn't for the last 100 years. I want to make everybody understand that when I say Syria, I mean the people and geography, not the state. And for me, the geography of Syria is all these countries that, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and the lands that were given to Turkey. That's the geographic area of Syria. Some people would call it the Fertile Crescent. It's one people. And it's what we are seeing today is a repetition of what we saw 100 years ago at the big, just before the World War One and through World War One. And the French and the British and the Ottomans at the time and the Zionists all together collaborated in the first stage to ethnically cleanse the Christian Syrians from the lands that are now in Turkey, from the northern parts of what was Syria, the floodplains of the Euphrates and Tigris, or Assyria, or Mesopotamia, whatever you want to call it. At that time, just before World War One and during World War One and after it, Kurdish militias were led by Turkish generals genocided, of course, the Armenians, that everybody knows about that, 500,000 Armenians. But what people don't remember is that another 500,000 Christian Syrians were genocided, and from those regions that are now in Turkey, from Adana, Iskenderun, all the way to Mardin and Diyarbakir. And those were killed and or expelled to what became the state of Syria. Okay. And this keeps on happening, as we see over the last 100 years, because the West, as the imposter of Christendom, the imposter of Judaism, okay, the one that abducted Christianity and Judaism, has a hate for the original Christians, the original Jews, the Arabs, the Syrians. Okay. And as long as there are the original Christians, the original Jews in Greater Syria, that can tell, just by existing, remind the whole world that we are the original ones. We are the holders of this torch of the Abrahamic theologies. The West cannot pretend to be the Christian Judeo civilization. Okay. And so we had that cut up of Syria in World War One, the north parts given to Turkey and cleared ethnically from the Christian Arabs, Syrians. And then we had the cut up of Lebanon and Palestine and Jordan and Iraq and Kuwait, all of them from this. During World War One, nobody wants to remember this either. The region of Greater Syria lost 3 million people in the culling. During World War II, a similar culling happened. And of course, the unending wars, the 1948, 56, 67, 72, 73, invasion of Lebanon, war in Iraq 1, war in Iraq 2. People, I know that we as Arabs, we as Syrians in general, are dehumanized to a point where people don't want to recognize these genocides. But we're talking about over 15 million from the 1890s till now. 15 million Syrians in all of those lands that got cut up by the West have been culled. Millions more made into refugees across the world. This is why you have millions of Lebanese and Syrians and Palestinians, tens of millions in Latin America and North America and Europe, where the population of Lebanese outside Lebanon is 5 times the number of Lebanese inside Lebanon. It's crazy. And this is the last wave. In the last week alone, 12,000 Alawi and Christian Syrians have been genocided at the hands of the Wahhabi death squads that are controlled from Tel Aviv, Ankara, and Washington, Paris, and Doha and Qatar. And the whole world is watching. This is not, and the only reason that this continues is because we resist. We resist to allow the Crusaders and the Crusaders to desecrate the memory of Jesus and Moses, our forefathers. We resist and refuse to be broken up into nothingness, into tribes, when we are a nation, a people. Okay. And I think what we're seeing now is just the beginning of the larger cull that's going to happen. And that's only going to be stopped through a bigger war, which is going to return to the region.
Yeah, it looks to me like there is, there's larger war that is going to be, and one of the ways they try to do it is through, rather than a big war that everyone can see, they try to do it through individual massacres and killings, and then they don't say it's a big war. But I think the war is not just going to return to the region. If we're honest, it never left. You know what I mean? I mean, they said, "Oh, there's the Israelis are going to stop doing this," or that. They never stopped. They kept attacking the West Bank. They're like, okay, they're not going to attack Gaza. They won't leave southern Lebanon. Talk to me about what's happening. I forgot about to ask you about southern Lebanon.
Yeah, the Israelis continue to occupy these 7 hills or 5 hills in the south. At the same time, they continue to conduct air raids on Lebanon. 3 nights ago, they attacked Lebanon, not only the south, 26 or 27 air raids, mass destruction, many casualties. And they continue to snipe at residents in the south villages that are returned. There was 3 or 4 days ago, the Israeli military abducted a Lebanese soldier from his post and beat him up and disappeared him. But last night there was the Red Cross brought 4 Lebanese hostages that have been held by the Israelis, that were kidnapped over the last 6 months from the south of Lebanon. They returned them, civilians that were tortured while they were in captivity. And we don't know, honestly. I don't think the Lebanese government has yet given any true number about how many Lebanese have been abducted and are captive inside the Zionist colonies since the beginning of this war. This is a big question. I've been trying to find an answer to it, but I have no officials here in Lebanon have been answering this question. We've been putting these questions forward to security and government officials, and no answer. But I personally predict that there's a couple of hundred at least Lebanese civilians that have been kidnapped and abducted by the Israelis in the last 16 months. Anyways, so this is happening, by the way, while also during the last week with this genocide that's happening in Syria, the border villages in the north with Lebanon, there was clashes on both sides of the border. HTS tried to again invade into the Beqa' Valley, and the Shia tribes in the north, in the Beqa' Valley, fought them back. Similar thing happened north of Tripoli on the coast, in the Jabal Muhsin or Mount Muhsin area, just north of Tripoli city, is Alawai mountain. and the HTS attempted to enter from Syria to attack the Alawites inside Lebanon, and they fought them back. So we can see a coordinated attacks happening, okay? That the HTS attacking Lebanon from the north while they're ethnically cleansing Syrian Christians and Alawis and Shia. By the way, there's also been thousands upon thousands of refugees in the last week coming through the north. You know, this is above and beyond the close to 300 and something thousand Christian, Alawi, and Shia Syrians that crossed the border over the last 3 months. So we're seeing another wave right now coming from the north, from the coastal area. And I know I didn't touch on this because when we spoke about Syria, because I went to the wider historical context just to help our viewers a little bit. But this genocide that we're seeing in the coast of Syria wasn't only exclusive to the minorities, the Christian, Shia, or Alawis. There was multiple Sunni families that hid Alawi and Christian neighbors in their homes that also got liquidated by the HTS once they were found out. There was 3 or 4 different Sunni preachers that are famous in the country that made videos and messages on social media condemning the genocide against minorities in Syria that were also abducted, tortured, and killed on video by HTS. Okay. And we've seen demonstrations in the major cities of Aleppo and Damascus that are mainly Sunni cities and host like 60-70% of the population of Syria in those 2 cities. There was huge demonstrations against these ethnic cleansing and the genocide that's happening in the coast, and they were beaten up and fired on by the HTS thugs in the streets of Aleppo and Damascus. So this is not just a genocide against the minorities. This is all done to break the dignity and the will of the Syrian people and their national identity as a collective, whether it's to create these sectarian terms by us repeating the idea that Christians or Alawis or whatever are separate than the Sunnis, and or by attacking even Sunnis that are nationalist and unificationist.
Wow, it's unbelievable what's going on. Do we know anything about any potential resistance forces, any potential fighting back going on, the building of any resistance forces, anything like that, any resistance forces coming into the country? What do you know about that? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, originally 2 weeks ago was the launch of the main offensive by the resistance groups against HTS in the coastal area, and we saw, hundreds of HTS operatives and officials being killed or ambushed on the roads in Syria. Simultaneously, there was attacks on Israeli positions in the south, the areas that they've occupied south of Damascus, and in the Dar'a region and the Qunaitra region. But as this situation was totally coming out of hand, then HTS was going to collapse because the resistance in the coast, the resistance in the south of the country, as well as the Suwaida region that is mainly Druze, that's on the border with Jordan and Iraq, declared what do you call it autonomy from Damascus. That looked like the moment where the HTS government was going to collapse. And this is when both Turkey came to defend them in the coast and entered their military and used their helicopters and drones to attack villages and the resistance in the coast. But we also saw one other thing that people seem to have not noticed, which is that the Kurdish Contras that are collaborating with the American occupation in Deir ez-Zor, Hasaka, and Raqqa in the northeast of Syria, who for a decade and a half were pretending that they are stealing the oil and gas and wheat of Syria because they were defending that northeast from ISIS and Al Qaeda. Suddenly, under American order, signed a peace treaty with HTS, the supposed killers of the Kurds, and have now joined the government officially with their own militias, their contras, their death squads being absorbed into the national, quote unquote, military of HTS, not of Syria. There's no more national army of Syria. So,
which is the Turkish proxy, right?
Exactly.
And Turkey is supposed to be their enemy. Turkish government's supposed to be their enemies.
Exactly.
I thought all the time they said they're our enemies.
Exactly. So this is what people need to understand. The genocide of Armenians, the genocide of Syrians, Christians, and Arabs during World War I, before World War I, after World War I, was conducted at the hand of Kurdish militias led by Turkish generals. Okay. What we see right now, the ethnic cleansing that happened in North Syria of the Assyrian Christians, by the way, that nobody wanted to talk about, the Northeast that was under the control of the Kurds, saw a huge ethnic cleansing campaign in over 10 years, depopulation, stealing of the land from the Assyrian, basically the Syrian Christians and the Syrian Muslims in the Northeast. So these are all proxies of the same monster. The Kurdish military and government, the Kurdish militias, the Wahhabi and Ikhwani death squads, they're all under the rule of the Zionist empire governed from DC.
Let me show you something that I think I think it's important, and this is a prediction that I have. I think. Okay, we're seeing this global boycott of U.S. goods gains momentum amid tariffs broil. Right? Okay, they're saying it's the tariffs. You know, there was a time when what we heard was this: because of what's happening in Israel, there's going to be a similar South African type of boycott against the Israelis, and they'll never be able to make it. Right? Of course, as we know, the Israelis are the hand of the empire. You know what I mean? That's like saying, I'm going to boycott Garland's hand, but not the rest of his body. It's a hand of the empire for that particular region. I think the brutality of the empire, the lies and the ways that the empire does are, and the whole world right now is looking at it. We're going to a place where the civilized world is going to look at the U.S. and in all likelihood the Europe at some point and say, we're not buying their stuff. That the civilized world, they're so isolating themselves through brutality that the civilized world is going to say, we can't buy their stuff anymore. We don't want their Coca-Colas, their McDonald's. It's poison anyway. We shouldn't even be drinking it, much less anybody else eating that crap. But I think what little we make left, because we don't really make much of anything anymore, but some crappy cars that don't even work, that a global boycott is going to come because the openness of the brutality and viciousness is getting to a point they're not even trying to hide it anymore. And that the civilized world is going to realize that the U.S. empire and its proxies are the far worse than South Africa ever was, because South Africa was internally brutal, but it didn't have the power to do that all over the world.
Oh yes, look, when the BDS movement, officially called itself BDS movement, started in 2005. I personally thought, it will not be successful because you can't just BDS the Zionist colony, and while it's all its economy and its military is actually directly subsidized by the Western capitals. BDS should have been from the beginning against all Western products, period. It should have been a blanket boycott, as the one that was authored by Syria in the 1970s, calling on a full boycott of all Western products until they end their support for the fascist, Jewish supremacist Zionist ideology and colony. And today, this is the same and only solution. The whole world should stop buying anything from the West. And I think it's happening now easier than it could have happened in the 1970s, because finally we have products coming from China and other countries that are not Western imperial holdings that are equivalent and better than products coming from the West. And therefore, even without trying to convince people, they have an alternative that's not going to hurt them, their pocket and or their quality of the product that they want to buy. You know, it probably was harder in the 70s to say to everybody, you can't buy cars from the West, when who but the Japanese and European cars were you going to buy? You know, there was no car producers anywhere else. But now you've got Chinese cars, you got Indian cars, you got Iranian cars, you got Russian cars you can buy, and it's of the quality and better. So the world is shifting naturally. Add to it that now we have a new generation in the South and East that is not fully enamored with Western culture. Okay, I mean, the power of Western cinema and television in the 20th century was unparalleled. You know, people were wanting to live the dream of Hollywood, right? Today, people are watching Korean and Japanese and Indian and Chinese and Egyptian and Brazilian television and movies, and South African and Nigerian. So the
Hollywood's trash. It's trash, garbage.
Hollywood is trash.
Garbage. It's horrible. They don't even put out something. Even in those days, you can look at some of the movies and say, that was a pretty good movie. Now, it's trash.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I feel old when I bring out, oh, what's the last movie that you actually felt, you know, happy about watching? And I'm like, oh shit, you know, I'm pretty old. So yeah, so there's a huge, you know, this new generation, their cultural outlook, even, by the way, with huge failures from whatever resistance media out there. Without successful resistance media, we still have this now fragmentation of international audience that's making it harder for the West to control new generations as they grow, to enamor them with these non-existing ideas of democracy and human rights and what have you. And so the world is changing, and the boycott is happening. People should officially enroll in it and try very hard. And the harder we try, the better the outcome is going to be. And this is partially also why we see the West having, the empire having to resort to wars more so than before. Okay, full-out wars. It's trying to break the domination of the market, let's say, of China, break the path of shipping through the Arabic world, the Silk and bridge and the road, whatever, Silk Road and bridge, or that the belt that they wanted to create. It's trying to, Trump was talking about Panama and trying to ban Chinese shipping through there. Is also, again, to push back the domination of Chinese trade with the rest of the world. So this is why we will see now Trump actually, although he was sold as the peace president during the election, I think he will probably start more wars than anybody expected.
Lastly but not least, Canada. A country that you know very, very well, so-called, they're going to get a new, imperial puppet. Trump is squeezing him like an orange. Oh, you got to be part of, the Greenland, what have you. One good thing, and that is he's showing complete disrespect and disregard for their sovereignty. And I'm glad, because vassals and puppets do not deserve respect whatsoever, or the appearance or illusion of respect. So good, the people of Canada need to know that the empire sees them as a plaything, a puppet to do what they're told. And now, so who's the new puppet, so-called leader, and what do we need to know about what's happening in Canada?
Yeah, there was obviously Trudeau left his post, and instead of calling for an election, what he did is he replaced himself in the position of the leader of the Liberals. So because it's a parliamentary quote unquote democracy, it means the party with the largest bloc in the parliament appoints the prime minister. So what he did is he just resigned as the head of the party, and then they replaced without having to go through an election. And now we have a new prime minister. His name is Carney, and it's not the like Carney as maybe it is like Carney as in Carnival. One of those. You remember the old Carneys in the most hairy woman in the world and stuff like that. He's probably another one of those clowns, right? The clowns in the Carney. But the first thing that he did is he appointed his head of his chief of staff is the most Zionist outspoken in Canada, that has been putting a lot of hate out against the Palestinian community and those who support Palestinian liberation in the country. So that gives you a clear indication where he's positioning himself. One thing that some people were happy about is that the internal election in the Liberal Party, Chrystia Freeland, the granddaughter of one of the leaders of the Nazis in Ukraine, who was the co-prime minister with Trudeau, she came out like fifth, I think, in the internal elections with less than 3 or 4% of the vote of the Liberals, meaning she got humiliation. But as you said, obviously this is another puppet. Canada is, all the resources are mainly owned by the United States or US companies, whether it's the lumber or the mining. There's only a few, oil fields that the Chinese own, and that's probably going to be squeezed out. Trump wants to squeeze out the Chinese from owning anything in Canada and or investing in the ports and the pipelines, which the Chinese did invest in, but they don't own all out these ports and pipelines. He's probably gonna get the Saudis and the Emiratis to replace those investments once he squeezes more Canada. Remember, and maybe our viewers don't know this, Canada used to have a wheat board where it's like a co-op of all the farmers in the country that controlled the prices of wheat in terms of export to make sure the Canadian farmers got their fair share. And the former Conservative Prime Minister of Canada a decade ago, Stephen Harper, he made a decree, basically, just like Trump is doing right now these days, and dissolved the co-op, the Canadian Wheat Board, and forced it to be sold to the Saudis. So Saudi Arabia right now, a country that has zero farming because it's a desert, owns the largest wheat reserve in the world. The Canadian wheat reserves. And so you could expect that Trump is going to do the same with the, force the Canadian government to do the same with the other resources that China owns in Canada. And if he can't buy it himself, or Canadian American billionaires buying them, he will get the vessels in the Gulf to foot the bill.
And I would suspect this guy is probably, now this is my cynicism. for whatever reason, they were finished with Trudeau. You know what I mean? The bloom was off the rose, as it were. You know, he doesn't have, you know, he's done a lot of things that people are angry at. The Canadians don't really like him. He kind of looks like a fool. And so they were like, well, this puppet has played, you know, as long as we could do. And he's kind of exposed as brilliant idiot. And so we'll bring in a new puppet. You know, to me, it's just like, it's not that the people replaced the empire replaced the puppet they had with a more productive puppet that maybe they can get a couple years out of this guy before they have to replace him. That's all it seems to me.
Oh yeah, Trudeau. I mean, he played his role really well. He was supposed to be like the playboy prime minister, and you know, after a decade, he wasn't hot enough anymore to distract with his playboy, you know, face, right? So they couldn't play that card anymore, and they now brought in like a traditional looking guy that's gonna be all business talk, and very, he's, you know, because Trudeau with all that personality adage, after a decade or so of being the prime minister, he can't play a different role. Also, we go back to that idea of the casting, and not being able to break the casting after you play a role for so long in so many replays of the same movie. But so now they brought in a new guy, Carney, and we can see also how it's a move for the liberals themselves into the conservative playing territory of the Conservative Party in Canada. And in fact, it seems the new prime minister is very close to the premier of Ontario, the Conservative premier of Ontario. Right now, the premier of Ontario has been having direct talks with Trump. So it seems like we're gonna get, because you know, Ontario and like the rest of Canada had to put the 25% tax on American imports because of the trade war that Trump started. And one of the reasons that Trump wanted to squeeze Canada is because 75% of electricity generated in Canada is actually exported to the northeast of the US. You know, all those states from Michigan to New Jersey cannot survive without the export of the hydroelectricity, electricity that's made through the dams in both Quebec and Ontario and New Brunswick. And the Canadian government was basically putting a tax on this export before even the Trump put in his tax. They were putting a tax on this export so they can make some money out of it. And what the Trump now got is the premier of Ontario just lifted the tax on electricity export to the United States, meaning he right now shot Quebec and New Brunswick, the other two exporters of electricity, in the gut or in the back, or you know, in the sack, whatever you want.
You're right.
So now Quebec is reeling because it's going to lose all the electricity export, and this also outplays the hand of the prime minister. If you know the province itself moves against the prime minister and exports electricity without tax, what is the prime minister going to do? Is it going to go into war with the province that holds half of the population of Canada? Ontario holds half of the population of Canada, by the way.
Wow. The last thing, because we only got 5 minutes. The last thing, Romania, to me, you know, I remember when the EU, they said, well, we've done it in Romania and we'll do it in Germany if we need to. The idea that there was a real election. And I'll put it like this. A crook is a crook. So when you look at what's happening in Romania, here's what I say. There are no real elections in Europe. The idea that they'll do it in Romania, that they'll threaten to do it in Germany and say, well, we have to do it in Germany, we'll have to, but France and these other places are having elections. What we have just learned, if you didn't already know this, is there is not a single country in the entire empire, forget them, in the empire, that will have an honest election. That the days of democracy, it's all a dream. It's all that there's, I remember, how about this? Mike Pompeo saying, if it looks like Jeremy Corbyn is going to win, we won't wait. In other words, Britain can't. I remember Obama saying, well, if it looks like Bernie Sanders is going, not that Bernie Sanders is some great savior, but Obama said, well, if it looks like Bernie Sanders is going to win, then we'll have to act. In other words, if the Democrats are going to put in somebody that we don't like, we'll have to act. The idea that there's a single election anywhere in the empire that's real is I think, being exposed by what's happening in Romania.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was, surprised of how bold they were. First off, they, stealing the election from the guy or refusing it, and then now that he was clearly going to win it again, just banning him from running and maybe jailing him. This is not going to play out well in Romania, and definitely. Look, all of these signals that we're seeing, from the arrest of, this kitchen slave Mahmud Khalil to this elections debacle in Romania, are signals that the facade of democracy, human rights, whatever, that the West played since World War II is collapsing, and it's outlived its usefulness even to the elite within the West. And right now we're going to have vicious fascism out and out. Remember, really World War II was the Germanic Anglo peoples asserting that they are the superior against the other, what we would call now white people, the Latin, meaning it's French, Italians, Spanish people, and the Slavs. And the only reason there was a collapse of the Germanic Anglo alliance was because he turned to attack the UK. Right now we're coming back to that. Okay, the United States, and as we will see this now collapse of the EU, there has to be a reassertion of the pecking order in the white club. Okay, are the Germanic, the Latins better, and is the master in Berlin, London, or Washington DC? And as we see, the United States is asserting that DC is the inheritor of all of those previous empires, and people in Berlin and Paris and London have to, follow the line. Will there be a rise of nationalist fervor in Germany? I don't know. I mean, there is fascists, definitely Nazis all across Europe, but up until now, they're carrying the Israeli flag on top of their flag. So as long as you're flying the Israeli flag on top of your Nazi flag in Europe, it means you have accepted Jewish white supremacy, the new form of Nazism, Zionism, as the epitome of the whiteness. So how are you going to go fight with the United States as a German or as a French or as a British if you already accept that there is a master on top of you that's in Tel Aviv?
Exactly. Well, thank you very much, Laith. Let's not forget, everybody, once again, I'm going to show on the way out, I'm going to remind everyone that Laith has a very important site. And it is freepalestine.video. That's the website. You notice there's their latest episodes, field reports, military operations, and of course you can donate. And you see there, you can donate one time or you can donate monthly. freepalestine.video. That's the website. It is critical that you share that on all your social media. So we got about 400 people. That should be 400 people sharing that on all their social media platforms. Those who can afford, please become a sponsor of the website, and make sure that when you share it, you put a little with your posts, you put it up there, and you ask people to, or remind people, the importance of of helping to sponsor and helping to donate as best they can. You know, one of the things that's important to understand now is that media such as this, that alternative media is helping to drive a wave of awakenings in the world. We really are, that there's an awakening going on in the world, and it's being driven by um, uh, uh, um, alternative media. We've got to be wary, because what of course is starting to happen, and what we're going to see happen, is a lot of these people who are losing their jobs in the mainstream media are going over, and now they got a YouTube show. And so what they're of course going to do is try to pretend that they're social media, I mean alternative media, that they're going to say Don Lemon has like a YouTube show. The puppets of all puppets are now going to have a YouTube show, and they're going to act like just because they have a YouTube show, they're alternative media. But you know, Laith, they're going to say the same damn things that they were saying. So freepalestine.video. It's critical that you become a part of that. Share this on all your social media platforms. Subscribe. Follow me on Rockfin. Follow me on Rumble, just in case anything happens anywhere else. Thanks a lot. Laith and Garland, we'll see you again next week. We're out.